Hello and welcome to the 77th episode of the Accountant Success Secrets podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Philippa Haynes, branding expert for accountants and bookkeepers, supporting you to stand out.
And I'm Mark Lee of Bookmark Lee. I'm a mentor, speaker and debunker. Since 2023, Philippa and I have been interviewing inspiring accountants and bookkeepers who are doing great things, have years of experience, and whose stories can inspire and encourage other accountants and bookkeepers.
Yeah, we both recognise that every accountant and bookkeeper is unique and distinct. They have different backgrounds, experiences and reasons for starting and building their practices.
So we asked them to share their stories, including the highs, the lows, and what they've learned along the way. We look to explore the things that have made them different in terms of their background, successes, failures, and their focus. And our aim each week through our interviews is to provide some fundamental insights for you, our loyal listener.
Beyond that, we also try to fit in regular reflections episodes like this one. So today, in just 30 minutes or so, we're reflecting on 4 of our most recent interviews, and we'll both share and discuss something from each interview that resonated with us personally.
Just before we do that, a word about the sponsor of our podcast, Pinnacle Global Group, the trusted outsourcing partner to over 150 accounting and bookkeeping firms across the UK and Ireland, led by a London-based chartered accountant, Mayank Panja. With offices in London and Mumbai and a team of over 300 professionals, Pinnacle provides both compliance resourcing from accountants, bookkeepers and payroll admins to tax and audit associates and value-added support, including management accountants, virtual finance controllers, financial analysts, and more. They're GDPR compliant, ISO certified, covered by PII, and offer flexible models, full-time, part-time, or pay-as-you-go. You can even start with a trial period or join their sponsored trip to Mumbai to meet the team in person. Find out more at www.pinnacleoss.co.uk or click the link wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Also supporting the podcast is the Tax Advice Network. Their website enables accountants to choose specific specialist tax advisors for general tax support or for help across any of over 100 areas of tax. It's free to use. You just pay the tax advisor you choose after agreeing terms with them. Go take a look at their website called findataxadvisor.online, where you can also register to get their weekly tax tips, which are written especially for general practitioner accountants.
And finally, before we move on to our reflections, you can also now subscribe to our podcast on the Patreon platform. This is where you can show your love and support for Accountant Success Secrets and also subscribe for exclusive Patreon-only extras.
Yep, you'll need to download the Patreon app, but once you've subscribed, you will get the extra episodes via your normal podcast platform. You'll find details of what to do in our normal podcast notes and on the Accountant Success Secrets pages on Facebook and on LinkedIn.
Well, now we've got all that out of the way.
Yes.
We can move on to our first reflection. And as always, we've had 4 fabulous interviews. We don't really tend to know our guests very much before we talk to them, literally just before each interview. And it's a great delight, and I'm going to say a relief in some ways, that they all turn out to be so fascinating and so unique and different. So,
yeah, no, that's lovely. So who are we going to be starting with first then? Looks like it's episode 73, is it?
Yeah, our interviewee was Steph Beeston Clark, who leads Beeston Clark Accountants based in Winsford, Cheshire. And I loved some of the key quotes that Steph talked about, including that, and that she said she's learned from, including never say never, trusting your gut, being kind to yourself, and the one that I really want to pick up on, nothing is impossible if you want it to happen. And these are all really important and clearly meant a lot to Steph. And I wasn't going to challenge her on the podcast, but I do have a bit of a problem with that last one. Nothing is impossible if you want it to happen or if you want it enough. It doesn't sit well with me. It's this idea that you can almost manifest your future if you want something enough. And a lot of people get sucked into this. It's never worked on me. And I think a lot of people have been disappointed. And a bit like this nonsense with Tylenol and Trump making women feel guilty about taking painkillers during pregnancy. I don't think we should make people feel guilty for doing something that's perfectly harmless. And not that I'm a medical practitioner, but all the scientists and all the medical people are.
You need to be
addressing
careful.
that.
Trump will be getting in touch with you.
If Trump listens to this podcast, I'd be amazed. But my point is, you get a lot of people who are made to feel guilty. They didn't want it enough. That's why it didn't. That's why they weren't successful. They didn't want it enough. And I just think, and we see celebrities and sports people being claiming their success as a result of how much they wanted to achieve things and how hard they worked. Fine, but and that they pursued any dream until they succeeded, and that is wonderful. So why do I have a problem with it? Well, it's because we rarely recognize what happened to the people who came second or third in the competition. When you think about it, it's grossly insulting to suggest that the people who didn't quite achieve top place or whatever didn't want it enough. So I just wanted to say it's okay if you're an accountant or a bookkeeper and you've yet to be successful. It may be you don't want it enough, but it may be that you need to tweak and do things differently. Working hard isn't always enough. You need to take actions and do things differently. If you carry on doing what you've always done, I used to say you'll carry on getting what you've always got. More recently, I've said if you carry on doing what you've always done, you may get less than you used to get because everything is changing. So working hard is great. Having a dream is great. But I do sometimes find either on ad hoc conversations or one-to-one conversations with accountants that they're working hard without clarifying where it is they want to get to, and then taking steps to get there. And that is just as important as wanting something. But if you don't have great clarity around it and take the right steps, you may not achieve it. Not because you didn't want it enough, but because you didn't know or understand what you would need to do to get it. And I just do feel strongly we shouldn't make people feel bad for not wanting things enough when they are working really damn hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think Steph she's got quite a nice balance in many ways, though, because I mean, she did say one of her other kind of not slogans, but just keep saying yes. And I think whilst that's, again, not everybody wants to be like that, but there is a certain amount of it makes sense if you say yes, then you're always sort of moving forward. I think, this idea of, having a certain amount of energy and a certain amount of dynamism, and not kind of sitting back always and being nervous. I think she's probably learned that, because I know also that she talked about bouncing back from mental health problems, and I think that, you're right, was because she was working so hard, and I think she lost that perspective probably, which is what you're saying, and it's at that point that she took on a mentor, didn't she? I don't think it was even an account, within the accounting space. I think it was more about a life coach.
Well, she said they were a mindset coach.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but yes, that's right. And she talked then about meaning, not margins. And I think that's the lovely kind of balanced view, isn't it? Which is you've got to have meaning in your life and a sense of purpose. And it's not always about the money and working as hard as you can, but it's kind of being a bit more kind of careful and purposeful about it. So I thought that was really good as well. So I think she's gone through a journey of kind of emotionally and psychologically kind of working out what's best for her.
That's right. She said the mindset coach had helped her believe in herself. And it reminded me of my clients have often told me that I've helped boost their self-confidence, because often, until they're feeling more self-confident, they struggle with value pricing. They struggle with building a sustainable practice that makes enough money for them. And Steph talked about how it was only after her confidence had been rebuilt that she felt she was making enough money to pay her and her staff and the costs for running the business, not necessarily making a fortune, because part of her mantra or ethos is helping charity CEOs to sleep at night, working with a charity. I loved that strapline. Helping charity CEOs to sleep at night. We look. Would she say we look after your money so that you can look after your cause? That was it.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. I think that's very simple, but very, very good. And I think the values, obviously, if she's charity focused, you assume that somebody has good values, and it has a higher purpose. But I think also she wants to nurture that within her own kind of practice. And one of the things I loved was the fact that in the recruitment process, she actually asked people to video themselves and talk about their values and what's important to them. And first of all, that's about kind of understanding if they're the right sort of person, but equally it's understanding whether they're able to communicate, they are able to sort of do this virtually and kind of be in front of a client, because increasingly that's what's going to be important. It's not about sitting behind a desk and sort of tapping away on an Excel spreadsheet. We've now got all of the technology there. What that actually means is you are going to be required to step away from the desk and actually have those more meaningful conversations.
That's absolutely right. And I think that was something she talked about in the Patreon extra, or the extra interview we did for Patreon subscribers. So if you want to know more about that, listeners, then do take a look at the Patreon subscribers only extra interview. We should move on. Episode 74 introduced Simon Mason, who leads his firm Simas Accounting and Tax in Bedford. Do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, let me find my notes. Yes. Now, this was an interesting one, wasn't it? Because what I loved about Simon's session was he was just so honest and realistic about business and how business works. And he was talking very much about his practice. Really didn't grow in the first year. Second year was still a struggle. He was saying that years 4 and 5 are really where you start to have some kind of some profit. You're beginning to feel like you're running a proper business, which I think is great, because anybody listening to this who's quite new, I think you go on LinkedIn or other social media and you're expected to be famous and successful within 5 seconds. But actually, he was very clear about, it's all about long-term client relationships, and those you have to put in a lot of work and a lot of kind of money, essentially, hours that you probably don't charge, in order to get to a place where it is profitable in year 4 and 5. So I thought that was really interesting, and a good sense check for those people who sometimes are more frustrated about their own practice and where it's going.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I remember another observation from Simon was that if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably not get there. And I suggest something very similar to accountants. If you don't know where you're going, you'll probably end up somewhere else. It's the same sort of thing. I also particularly liked his reference to failure as a way of learning, because it ensures you improve. And I love that mindset. It accords with something I first heard from Tony Buzan many years ago. Tony Buzan originated mind maps, and he pointed out that when you're on an upward trajectory and something goes wrong, you can look at it as failure, or you can look at it as an experience. And if you're prepared to pick yourself up from it, you can get on and continue on your upward trajectory a lot faster than if you just sit back and moan about the failure. And I think Simon really epitomized what Tony was talking about there. Someone who, something doesn't go right, well, let's have a look. Why hasn't that gone right? Pick yourself up, move onwards and upwards. And I've had related conversations with numerous mentoring clients over the years. And I get thanked for the way that I sort of helped them overcome the struggle or the issue, the challenge, the problem, the failure, or whatever it was, faster, they tell me, than they might have done if they continued to struggle by themselves. So that's quite comforting.
Yeah. One of the other things that Simon picked up on, and I think Arun as well, who we'll talk about in a bit, was this idea of kind of the failings of marketing. Now, marketing long term, and this is where you and I maybe disagree. I mean, referral is great, and reputation, it's a people business. But there is also the requirement for that marketing machine that sort of works kind of in the background, really, and just continues to pull in and sort of the right clients. But what he talked about was chasing Google ads, and he'd done a lot of that and spent a lot of money. And I know Arun as well talked very much about spending 20k, I think, on an advert in a magazine. And for me, it's really important. It is a really important point that there are some shiny things which accountants probably think are the best thing to do. It's like a Google ad or a advert in a rag or something like that. But actually, a lot of the time, it's money down the pan, because it's the easy things. It's kind of like the lowest hanging fruit in many ways, but it doesn't really get you anywhere. Just 20k on an ad for nobody to get back to him is just, I mean, it's criminal, and it's not unusual as well. So you will always be approached by magazines, publications saying, we've got this kind of opening, somebody's dropped out, you can have some money off, and it's only going to be 2,000 rather than, unless you're absolutely convinced, don't do it.
One of my mentoring clients was very touched when I sent him a note saying, congrats on your ad in the Sunday Times. I'd like to talk to you about how successful it is or something. And he thanked me very much. And when we did speak, they had done exactly as you said. He'd got a call and he thought, well, it's only a couple of grand. And he put the advert in. I am the only person who commented to him about the advert.
Really?
He got no business whatsoever, which I'm afraid I anticipated would be the case. He and I don't always agree on everything he wants to do from a marketing perspective, and he does try things, sometimes that work, sometimes that don't work. But I was just amused that apparently I was the only person who contacted him about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a shame, and it does give marketing a bad name.
Well, I think the other thing, which was not relevant to him, and probably wasn't relevant to Arun, and I hope it's not relevant to Simon, is a lot of people have adverts, and whether this is true of Google ads, it's true of your LinkedIn profile, it's true of adverts anywhere you put, which essentially drive people to their website. And if their website isn't built to convert people who followed the advert, then the advert's a waste of time. Anyway, there's a whole science around that. That's getting way beyond our remit for this reflections episode. Just something else I wanted to pick up from the conversation with Simon. He said very early on with new clients, he wants to talk about their children and understand what age they are. From the perspective of the advice he's going to give them, in terms of his clients by reference to the different life cycles, not life cycle, depending upon how old their children are and what's coming up.
Life
And
stage, we call it in
life
marketing.
stages. That's the one. Thank you. I'm sure they appreciate those questions and his genuine interest. You'll need to listen to the pod to hear his it really is a beautiful insight, and also the 3 questions that he asks prospective clients in this regard. Yeah. That's on the main podcast, really worthwhile. And every accountant will have their own favorite questions, but it just makes so much sense to be asking questions that reveal who the prospective client is, and it helps you decide whether or not they're the sort of person you want to have as a client. And I do this when I'm mentoring very early on, having a conversation with somebody typically before they become a client. And I sometimes realize that the person who's called me is not somebody I'm going to want to work with, at least on a regular basis. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I realize generally before we get to the stage of considering them to be a client, and I'll make my excuses, because I only want to work with people that I like and that I feel I can really help, and who are open to working with me and at least listening to my advice, if they don't always take it.
If people don't, if they're not open and they don't want to listen to advice, that's frustrating for everybody and a waste of money. I mean, there are lots of people. One of the things I always listen out for is the word "but."
Yes.
If I have a call with somebody just to sort of chat through, if they're starting to say "but" a lot, then you know that they're pretty much entrenched in what they believe.
That's a great observation. The other thing I should just mention, when Simon was talking about marginal gains and making 1% changes across a range of factors in his practice, I thought I remembered where I'd first come across the idea. Transpires it wasn't the book that I thought it was, because I looked through it afterwards. It's still worth thinking about the fact that 1% increase in fees combined with a 1% reduction in costs will have a compounded positive impact on profits, by which I mean the combined impact will always vary depending upon what you're talking about, but it could easily have something like a 10% increase in your bottom line. Profits increase by more than you'd expect because the reduced costs are now subject to the higher price point that magnifies the overall effect. Anyway, if you listen to the podcast, ignore my reference to the book that I talked about. It wasn't that one. Can't remember where it was now. Anyway.
Okay. Well, episode 75 now, with Andrew Coombs of King's Oak Accountancy in Somerset. He's near me, actually. You want to go first?
Yeah, well, where to start with all the practical issues that came out of our conversation with Andrew? Like a number of our interviewees, he credited the customer-facing skills that he developed before he moved into accountancy as being critical to the success he's had building the practice since he took it over from his father. In Andrew's case, he was originally in financial services, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and I think, that I don't know whether that's an unusual move, is it, Mark?
It's relatively unusual. I know a couple of accountants who've trained in order to be allowed to give regulated advice. And years ago, we've got MTD for income tax around the corner. 30 years ago, we had self-assessment for income tax around the corner. And at the time, there was a lot of thought that financial advisors would start doing tax returns and insurance companies would start doing tax returns, because you get all the information you need in order to be able to give them financial advice from doing tax returns. For various reasons, it never really happened. There were 1 or 2 financial advisory practices that started doing tax returns. Whether many are still doing it now, I don't know. So no, it's quite unusual to move from financial advisory into accounting and tax.
Yeah. He was interesting though, wasn't he? I mean, again, somebody very strong around team. I think that always comes out, but increasingly, I think we ask what that means, because it can mean all kinds of things, can't it? But I liked he almost had a bit of a line of people that he thought he probably want to have come on board at some point. He'd already identified people. I think he was just about to take one person on,
Yeah.
but he'd already had a conversation with somebody else, thinking, that they might be able to take over from me. I think that was what he was talking about.
There was a
Because
part of that. He certainly mentioned taking on new part-time staff initially as freelancers.
yes, that's
And
right.
once they prove themselves, then they move on to the payroll. Obviously, I'm sure he deals with the technicalities around that, so everything's being done legally. But it means that the probation period is easier to address because typically they're freelancing during what might otherwise be the probationary period. But the whole approach to freelancing and then part-time stuff really helpful for working mums who are coming back into the work environment. And the whole arrangement, I think, suits them because their working hours can grow as their home arrangements evolve and as the practice expands. And I think it's a great way to build an accountancy practice. And in Andrew's case, one that is fully remote.
Yeah, I love that as well. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people do that. They grow over time, but it's just the way he said it, the way he described it. It was almost like people were masters of their own kind of destiny, and if they wanted to grow it themselves, there was that opportunity. It just felt like that, there was a lot of opportunity within the practice, and it wasn't always kind of down to him, but as things grew, that there was that potential, which I think I think that really helps if you're a team and that actually anything's possible and it's down to what you want to do rather than anybody else. So I thought that was really good. And I mean, Andrew, I think he's got a good head on his shoulders, and he obviously, like many owners, kind of identified himself as the bottleneck, and so was looking for another one of him. And of course, then that means that you can get on and run the business, which is a very different skill set and takes time. You can't always do everything, especially if you're really getting granular with stuff, client work.
That's right. And he mentioned working with business advisors and getting referrals for them to great clients. And
That's right.
as importantly, the fact he's getting more involved in delivering business advice himself, recognizing he can generate more fees for that than he can for compliance services. And he even intends to develop that as a standalone business alongside the accountancy firm. And I think that's a great insight and accords with the advice I've long been giving accountants, that whilst compliance work is not dying, there is I've been saying this for 15 years. Listening to other people go, compliance work is dying. No, it's not. But it's not dying, but there's greater competition for it and a greater perception amongst clients it isn't high value. It's just pushing a few buttons. We know that's not the case, but that's what some prospective clients might think. And therefore, the challenge to fee increases for compliance work is greater than ever, and particularly for winning new clients who might look at the competition and as preferable alternatives if their rates are lower. But those accountants who are evidently delivering valuable business advice will be more in demand. And also remember that business advisors of the type that Andrew has been meeting with, they were consultants and business coaches and the like, able to access the same financial software as accountants for analyzing financial data, for example. But they've probably got they will often have greater experience of promoting, pitching, and pricing their advisory services than many accountants have. And as a result, they may find it easier to win work than accountants. And the sooner accountants really boost what I call their key business skills in this area, the more likely they are to be able to fight off the competition from those business consultants and coaches. Because
and I think you've just talked. Oh, sorry, go on. I think you've just talked yourself into why marketing's important, because actually, competition, added value, it is much more now about showing and demonstrating to prospects how you approach the business of sorting out their financial business. And it's that position and that kind of, story is probably, it sounds a bit too soft, but it's kind of giving people enough of an insight to understand how they're going to be supported. And that's really important, because everybody can do compliance. There is less, if there is software behind it, there is less need for personality, relationship skills necessarily. But actually what you do need to do is show why it's still really important and why people are needing to spend that money, because there are other skills at play.
100%.
I'll get off my soapbox now. There we go.
In fact, I'm delivering a half-day webinar tomorrow for accountants on how to be better remembered, referred, and recommended.
Great.
And I'd make very much those points in the talk. Anyway, we should move on. Episode 76, the last one we're going to review today or reflect on today. We interviewed Arun Mehra, who's the owner and CEO of Samira, a practice he started over 20 years ago, and they've got a long time focus on the dentistry profession. So another niche area.
Yeah, I mean, this guy really is different, and the practice is very different. And I think that we use the word entrepreneur too much, but I do think that he is very entrepreneurial in the way that he looks at his business. I mean, first of all, there's the niche part, which is focusing on dentists, but his wife is a dentist, so the practice and the dentist practice kind of go hand in hand. So there's that kind of, they dovetail each other. So the insights and the kind of financial insights and all of that day-to-day stuff, his practice understands. So that's the first piece. Then the second piece is the way he's pulled together his team, not only in the UK but in India, not necessarily as outsourcing, but he sees the merits of that. He's actually gone the step further of setting up his own team over there when lockdown happened, and just realized that the firm needed to grow, and he wanted to grow it in-house, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, and then the next part, which is what we go into in our Patreon session, is around AI and how he is doing something really interesting with his own technology and app. And I really highly recommend you listening into that, because he's really out there. I think he's leading the way in terms of how AI is going to transform everybody's practice, and particularly theirs.
Yeah, that's right. He also said something I don't think we've ever heard before, in that he values his team over his clients. And that's something that might shock a lot of people who've bought into what's an often misremembered and misquoted suggestion that the customer or the client is always right. That quote actually comes from Gordon Selfridge, who founded Selfridge's department store. But what he actually said, the full quote, is the customer is always right in matters of taste. In other words, they're right as regards what they like. That doesn't make them right as regards everything else. And it's a point I frequently make to accountants. They need to ensure that clients respect the accountant's knowledge, skills, experience, and views, rather than expect the accountant to simply do what the client wants, because the client is always right. Haven't you heard? The client is always right. The customer is always right. No, actually, the original quote, not that you'd ever say this to a client. No, the original quote is the customer is always right in matters of taste. So if you like the red coat rather than the blue coat, that's not for me to challenge you on. But you say you want to wear a woolen coat out in the rain. I can tell you in my experience, that's not a good idea. I may just thought of that analogy. It's not brilliant, but
it'll do. Yeah. No, I mean, I think.
Just to finish, I mean, I can think of at least one of my mentoring clients who early on in his career frequently double checked with me if he was doing the right things when engaging with clients, because he instinctively felt that he shouldn't take on a particular client. And he just wanted to sort of sense check it with me, because his wife was saying, why are you not taking on that client? And they talk to me and he'd go back and say, Mark agrees with me. And apparently that helped.
Yeah, no, good. Yeah, I mean, to finish off with Arun, he's a very interesting character. Ex PwC, I think.
Yeah.
And we were talking that, in many ways they're two a penny, lots of people setting up, and that's not necessarily a differentiator these days. But what I do think is different about him is that he's a smart operator. He's got a very good business brain. He looks around corners, and certainly with AI and other things, he sees that as exciting rather than an obstacle. And I think, we've said that across all of the people. Steph is just keep saying yes. Simon is, it's not a mistake, it's just a sort of bump in the road. And there are quite a few practice owners here who have that right mindset, I think. But Arun really is that he is very, very dynamic, and I have absolutely no doubt that the next few years will be very exciting for him.
I agree. I loved his admission. He'd probably be earning more if he'd stayed in investment banking. He went to Bank of America after he left PwC. And I think he mentioned that Big Four partners probably make more than he does, but he's happier running his own firm. And that's really important. And I was reminded, I left practice almost 20 years ago, and I've long recognized I'd probably earn more money if I'd stayed as a tax partner. But I didn't want to take another tax partner role in a large accountancy firm. It just wasn't something I wanted to do for the next 20 or 30 years. And equally, those people who leave large firms or investment banking or anything else, thinking that as a qualified accountant, they could start an accountancy firm, as Arun suggested, they often have a rude awakening when they realize that their background and experience isn't sufficient for them to generate business running their own accountancy practice.
Yeah, because I mean, if you work for a big firm, then you don't need business skills. You need the skill, which is required within that business. But when you set up yourself, as Arun said, and many other of our guests, you've got to be the person who sort of locks the door, cleans the toilet, sorts out the software. You are absolutely the only person there. Which is,
and you've got to generate the clients as well in a way that you haven't had to before. And I think it's a huge challenge to recognize that. And I remember one of my mentoring clients very much had this in mind. My advice to him 2 years before he planned his own practice, I can't remember how we started talking to each other. My advice was to focus on building relationships with people. I know what it was. This is this was actually related to another point that Arun made about the ex-Big Four partners he comes across who think that once they've retired early at 55 or 60, that they can go out and get non-exec director work or consultancy work once they've sold or exited their big firm. And I had a mentoring client who I was helping him build his practice up before he sold it to retire, and he wanted. His dream was that he'd do some non-exec work and consultancy work after he sold his practice. And my advice to him 2 years ahead of the planned sale date or the target sale date was to focus on building relationships with people, either within his larger clients or others who weren't clients of his, but where he could evidence the value that he'd be able to bring once he was available to act as a non-exec director, rather than to simply assume that such work would fall into his lap, because it typically doesn't. You've got to make the effort, which takes us back to one of Steph's points very early on, that my observations, wanting it isn't enough. You've got to take the right steps to make it happen.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think we've covered a lot today, haven't we? We really have. And it's time to wrap up once again.
We'll be back to our normal interview format next time, and then there'll be another reflections episode like this in a few weeks' time. But I've enjoyed this run through of our last for interviews, Philippa, as I always do.
Yeah, no, me too. So if you are inspired and also would like to tell your story, then please get in touch with myself or Mark, and we'll try and fit you in either November or December.
Yeah, or even after that. But
or even after.
Sooner the better. You'll find all of the interviews and episodes we mentioned on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Patreon, and on Apple Podcasts. If you feel we deserve it, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help us reach an even wider audience. Please obviously also let us have your feedback and share the love online too. If you're a listener who just searches online each week for the next edition, or you only watch this on the LinkedIn feed, do please also subscribe on one of the podcast channels, or even better, on our Patreon channel, so you have a better idea of how many regular listeners we have.
Yeah. Just before we finish up, our thanks go to the sponsor of this episode, Pinnacle Global Group, your trusted outsourcing partner. Do check out their website and let their CEO, Mayank, know that you heard about Pinnacle Global on the Accountant Success Secrets podcast.
And thanks to the Tax Advice Network, the easiest way for accountants to reach specialist tax advisors. Remember, there's no charge for using the website, findataxadvisor.online, where you can also register to try their weekly tax tips written especially for general practitioner accountants. Philippa, do you want to quickly share contact details in the traditional way? How can listeners find out more about you and Insight 101?
So you can find me on LinkedIn or on my website, www.insight101.co.uk. I support accountants and bookkeepers to stand out. And I think we've talked a lot about the merits of marketing and differentiating your practice. That's what it's all about. I support you to do that. Firstly, to answer the question, what is different about us? And then secondly, to put that into practice, whether that's your website, your social media, any part of your marketing mix. So do get in touch if that is interesting. So Mark, how can listeners find out more about you and your support services for accountants?
Online everywhere. I'm Bookmark Lee, website bookmarklee.co.uk, LinkedIn. You can find me on Bookmark Lee or Mark Lee FCA. I tend to work with accountants running their own practice for a while without co-directors or partners, or maybe they had them before and they've left. But they've reached the stage where they want a decent sounding board to help them feel more confident as regards their plans, challenges, opportunities, key decisions. And I love hearing them tell me how much better motivated or excited they feel after our one-to-one conversations. Another wonderful, really helpful call was what one mentoring client said earlier this week. Others love the support and collaboration that I encourage through the online Soul Practice Club. And I'm always happy to have an initial conversation with no obligation, no strings, and no pushy sales technique. In any event, I'd also encourage you to reach out, connect with both Philippa and me on LinkedIn, and please also follow the podcast pages on LinkedIn and on Facebook.
So that's it. We're done. We're just waiting on confirmation of our interview guest for next week.
Yeah, well, actually,
we can't wait anyway.
Yeah, it's just the week after next, because we're going to have
the week after next. Yeah,
we're going to have a 1 week gap, but we will then be back. So thank you ever so much, Philippa. I love doing this Reflections episode with you again. And to everybody listening, or anybody listening, until next time on the Accountant Success Secrets podcast, or anywhere else we might meet online or in real life. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.